Hello everyone, this is Miss Wells, your special education instructional coach and teacher here at Parkside. I'm going to be walking you all through the RTI Tier 1 response flowchart. It is important to note that this process begins only after the staff member has utilized the Tier 1 strategies checklist. As we reviewed, the Tier 1 strategies checklist has a list of mandatory Tier 1 strategies to implement and suggested Tier 1 strategies to implement in the classroom prior to contacting the RTI team. It is important to ensure that you have utilized those mandatory strategies such as contacting home and documenting those contacts in the hub prior to contacting us, because when we receive a referral, that's the first thing we're going to check. Have the contacts been documented in the hub? And what other strategies have been used for this student prior to us coming into the classroom and observing that student? So once you have utilized that Tier 1 strategies checklist and you feel that you need additional support with this student, then you're going to make contact with the RTI team. So here at step 1 on the flowchart, contact can be made with the RTI team. You will contact us with a referral email using our RTI team email address, which is pkms-rti-team@pwcs.edu. In the email, you will want to document the student's name and a brief synopsis of what the concern is with the student and the Tier 1 strategies you've already implemented. Once the RTI team receives the referral, we will verify that those Tier 1 strategies that are mandatory have in fact been documented, and then we will plan to observe the student. 2 members of the RTI team will schedule a time to observe the student. We will look at the student's schedule and figure out a time that is best for one or both of us to come in and observe the student. During that observation, we will be looking to see if we believe the concern is behavioral, academic, or instructional, or even social emotional. We know that in the classroom, it can be hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on with one particular student while managing a class of others. So those 2 sets of eyes that come into the room will be able to observe certain behaviors or patterns or anything else that's going on in the classroom that may be impacting the student. Once the student has been observed, we as the RTI team will come together and make a determination as to whether or not the student needs to be referred on to someone else, or if we as the instructional coaches need to provide some additional strategies to the classroom teacher. If the team determines that this concern is mainly social emotional and or academic in nature, the student may be referred to work with their counselor. The counselor will then work with that student with strategies, and then also it's important to note that the counselor is going to follow up with the teacher and the RTI team once they have met with the student for a couple of sessions, just so that we can close that loop and make sure that everyone is informed and that everyone knows that this student concern has been addressed. If the concern is more academic or instructional in nature, then the concern will be referred to the instructional coaches, myself, Dr. Moore, and Ms. Gannett. If the student is having an issue with reading, then Ms. Gannett will work on some Tier 1 reading intervention strategies with the student and or provide that information to the teacher. Also, if the concern seems to be instructional in nature, that is when Dr. Moore or myself would provide the teacher with some strategies to use in the classroom that we feel like if were adjusted or implemented, that it would make an impact on how the student is learning in the room. If it is a case where we are providing the teacher with these strategies, we will follow up with the teacher to see if those strategies in fact helped the behavior of concern. And if not, we'll come back to the table and work on some additional strategies in a miniature coaching cycle. Here in the behavioral branch of step 3 is some very, very important information. Behavioral concerns will be referred to the student's grade level administrator through the minor behavior incident form. There are behavior processes already in place here at Parkside, so we want to make sure that teachers are utilizing those processes prior to contacting the RTI team, because the use of that minor behavior incident form is in fact a Tier 1 strategy. The minor behavior incident form is also what loops the administrator into the behavior of concern. Access to Mr. Hunley only comes through admin. When admin deems that the student needs to work with Mr. Hunley, then that student will be referred to Mr. Hunley by administration alone. So, you've made contact with the RTI team, they've observed your student, the concern has been referred out to either admin, the student's counselor, or one of the instructional coaches, and there's still a concern beyond that. At that point, the student is not making progress academically or behaviorally. That is when we would develop an intervention team to consider the next steps for that student. The intervention team is made up of the grade level administrator, a gen ed teacher, specialists, and other team members with relevant knowledge related to the student. At that meeting is where we would determine whether or not we need to move into Tier 2 of those interventions. And most likely, the answer would be yes, because we've already exhausted our Tier 1 strategies, and now it's time to move that student into the Tier 2, step of the RTI process. So, the point of the Tier 1 strategies checklist and this Tier 1 response flowchart is so that we can begin filtering through some of those concerns that are being passed on to other people in the building. We want to establish a clear process, and we want to establish clear roles so that people understand when there's a concern, what should they do? The first steps begin in the classroom, and we want to ensure that everyone understands what is required of them in the classroom prior to reaching out for additional help. Now, the RTI team is here to support students, but we're also here to support adults. So if you feel like you need additional help with Tier 1 strategies in your classroom, please reach out to one of the instructional coaches. We have no problem coming in and going over exactly what those Tier 1 strategies are. Again, one by one, step by step, going over how to utilize them in your classroom. There is no problem with reaching out to us and asking for additional help in that area. We're here to support the adults in the building as well as the students. I hope this video has clarified this flowchart, has clarified the steps in the process, and if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us or stop by our offices. We are always here to help and support you.